So today, we're going to dive into this really amazing map of the human mind, one that comes from the ancient Yogacara Bhumi Shastra. We're going to uncover what it calls the 10 root afflictions, those deep, sticky patterns that seem to drive so much of our inner chaos. All right, let's get into it.
Have you ever had that feeling where, no matter what you do, you just find yourself stuck in the same old loops, the same anger, the same craving, or just this general sense of confusion? Well, it turns out that's a pretty universal experience, and this ancient text offers a fascinating way to understand why that happens.
The text introduces this really crucial concept called klesha, which translates to affliction. And it's important to get this right away. This isn't just about being in a bad mood. A klesha is described as a deep, fundamental force that actually corrupts and disturbs our mental peace. Think of it like static on a perfectly clear radio channel, or like mud that clouds up clear water. It just obscures everything.
So how in the world do we start to make sense of all this inner static? Well, the text gives us a great starting point. It splits all these afflictions into two main categories. And really, understanding this simple split is the first key to decoding what's going on in our own minds.
And look, the distinction is actually pretty simple, but it's also really profound. On one side, you have the afflictions that come from how we think, all our incorrect ideas and distorted views about reality. Then, on the other side, you've got the afflictions that are rooted in how we feel, those raw, primal emotions and gut instincts that sometimes feel like they just come out of nowhere.
All right, let's dive into that first category, the view-based afflictions. You can think of these as the fundamental mistakes our mind makes in perception. They're the cognitive glitches that really form the bedrock of our suffering.
So here they are, the 5 big cognitive errors. And you can always see how they build on each other, right? It all kicks off with the biggest one, the belief in a solid, separate me. Once you have that, it's really easy to get stuck in extreme views, thinking things last forever or that nothing matters at all. From there, we might even adopt just plain wrong views. And then finally, we get attached to our wrong views, thinking our ideas or our rituals are the absolute best, the only way.
This, right here, gets to the absolute root of the problem. The text explains that this view of a personal self, this saskaya drishti, isn't just some philosophical idea. No, it's that constant gut-level feeling that our thoughts, our body, our emotions, that they all add up to some permanent, independent me. And it's this deep clinging to I and mine that becomes the anchor for every other distorted view we have.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the second category, the non-view afflictions. So if the first set was all about flawed thinking, this group is all about raw, powerful, and, let's be honest, often overwhelming feeling.
And here are the big 5 primal emotions: greed and craving for what we want, aversion and anger toward what we don't, and of course that puffing up of the ego we call pride. But what's really interesting here are the last 2, ignorance and doubt. The text doesn't classify them as intellectual problems. It says they're deeply felt states, like the raw feeling of being confused, or that gut-level paralysis of doubt that just stops you in your tracks.
The text defines ignorance, or avidya, as a force that actively obscures and obstructs. And this is such a key insight. See, ignorance isn't just a passive thing, like not having enough information. It's an active, deluded state of mind that literally prevents us from seeing reality as it is. It's like a foundational fog that allows all the other afflictions, whether it's a distorted view or a primal emotion, to grow. So we've got these 10 afflictions, 5 about how we think and 5 about how we feel. But how do they actually work? How do these inner states create all the drama and suffering in our daily lives? Well, the text lays out the process very, very clearly.
It's basically a 4-step cycle. First, an affliction just arises, a flash of anger, a surge of greed, whatever. Second, that inner state pushes us into action. We say something harsh, we grab for something. Third, every action has a result, a consequence. And here's the kicker. The experience of that result then reinforces the original affliction, making it even stronger and more likely to pop up again. It's a totally self-perpetuating loop.
So to wrap it all up, our inner turmoil, it comes from these things called kleshas, and they're neatly divided into flawed thinking and raw emotion. By mapping out these 10 core afflictions, this ancient text gives us an incredibly powerful diagnostic tool. Because let's face it, sometimes just being able to name what's happening in our own head is the first and most important step towards getting some clarity.
And that really brings this whole thing back to you, doesn't it?
This isn't just some ancient philosophy. It's a mirror we can hold up to our own minds. So as you go about your day, which of these 10 patterns, from that subtle feeling of pride to that deep clinging to I, do you notice showing up for you? Because the text suggests that the simple act of noticing, well, that's where the path to real freedom begins.